Sometimes the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
And welcome to the Back of the Range. I am your host, Ben Adelberg. This is episode 233. Couldn't wait one more day to release this very special episode. My guest on this episode is David Shefter. Shefty has been a staff writer for the USGA for over 20 years now. He's seen a few things, and he has the stories to prove it. He has the uncanny ability to recall the date, location, winner, runner-up, or just about any other detail about just about every significant amateur championship in the last 20 years, and maybe more. If you've been listening and following the Back of the Range for quite some time, you'll remember that I was very fortunate to have been invited by the USGA to be a content contributor at the US Amateur at Bandon Dunes in 2020. We were smack dab in the middle of COVID. Everyone had to test multiple times before and during the championship. But when I finally got out there to Bandon Dunes, I got to spend the week with a handful of USGA communications staff members that were on site. And one of them was Shefty. It was a fun and memorable week. Definitely started me and the Back of the Range off in a whole new direction. That's kind of what jump-started the ability for me to travel as much as I am and go to as many of these championships. So have to thank the USGA and Shefty for making that week so memorable. Shefty is like a walking, talking golf trivia game that runs exclusively on Cokes, Sour Patch Kids, and peanut M&Ms. That reminds me, I think I owe him a bag or two. Anyways, Shefty is, he's a beauty. I think that's the best way to put it. And if you find yourself playing in a USGA championship next year or just attending one, keep your eyes open for David Shefter. Because if you want to hear a good story or two, he's got plenty of them, and it doesn't take too much arm twisting to get him to share one. As always, make sure you're following along on social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Every episode is available at thebackoftherange.com. Let's get right to it. Mr. Shefter, you're at the back of the range, sir. How are you?
I'm great. You're probably a little better than me considering you're in Florida and it's a lot warmer. It actually snowed here today.
Life's about choices, Shefty. You gotta make your pick. Down here in South Florida, roughing it through about 70-degree weather and not a cloud in the sky. Where are you? Where are you at right now? Where are you roughing it?
I live in a town called Stewartsville, New Jersey. It's about 30 minutes or so west of Golf House, right on the Pennsylvania border. So I'm not too far from the Lehigh Valley, like Lafayette, Lehigh, the colleges there, and the Saucon Valley, which a lot of people know is one of the great venues in the Northeast, and we'll host the Cedar Open next year. About 20 minutes from there. So it's a nice little community, bedroom community.
There you go. So you mentioned Golf House, obviously, senior staff writer for the United States Golf Association. So just how close are you to some of the artifacts that the USGA has in their museum? Like, how close from your office or how close from your house are you to like a US Open trophy? Are there just trophies lying around the office just that anyone, how's this work?
They're not lying around the office.
Oh, okay. They're not.
We do have a little case in the foyer of the administration building.
Okay.
That showcases, I believe it's the US Open, Women's Open, and US Amateur trophies. But all the trophies, the originals, are actually in the museum right next door. It's just maybe a 2-minute walk, excuse me, from the administration building. And we have them in this Hall of Champions. And I don't know if you've ever been to the USGA, but
not yet.
There's a rotunda, and in the middle we have all the replica trophies of all the championships. And then on the outside, on the peripheral, we have panels for each year going from 1895 to the present. Each year is represented. And then we have the names of every champion and then what championship they won and where they won it. So we get a lot of past champions that come to the USGA for the first time, and they walk into the museum and they see their plaque, and they are overwhelmed with emotion. It just brings back a lot of great memories for them. And then they see the trophies, and they see their name on the trophies, and you see all the other names on the trophies. And it's a really cool place. And every champion who comes in is just awed by this room. And then obviously the museum itself showcases the history of golf, starting with Francis Ouimet's win in the 1913 U.S. Open up to the present.
That has to be a pretty incredible place to work, not just the fact that you're working for the USGA, but it's one thing to, be in an office setting, but to have champions come by, and also you can just pop out and think to yourself, man, I can't remember who won the 1975 U.S. Amateur. I guess I could look it up, but instead of doing that, why don't I just walk over and just take a look for myself?
Right. Yeah, I believe that would be Fred Ridley.
I knew you were. All right, so we're going to get this out of the way.
But yes, it's pretty. It's a living, breathing piece of history. And every time I go over there, if we get a champion that comes by, especially one that I've known or maybe even covered, it's just great to talk with them and reminisce about the championship they won and go over some of the stories. And then they look around and they're just sometimes they bring their wives, their kids, and they see this and they can explain to them, what they did. And even just not even so much the Hall of Champions area, but the actual museum itself.
Sure.
There's some incredible artifacts in there that some of the champions, every champion donates something. And so we've got medals, we've got shoes, we've got visors, we got the Arnold Palmer room, which has stuff from Arnie. We have the Jack Nicklaus room, the Mickey Wright room. So there's so many different parts and components to the museum that people can see and learn about the history of the game.
I will preface this episode for the listeners to just don't be surprised if throughout this episode Shefty rattles off trivia of like what just happened right there. When I just randomly said 1975 USAM, you immediately knew it was Fred Ridley, which you are correct. So don't be surprised if you hear more of this throughout the episode and think to yourself, is this Rain Man? And it's not. It's just Shefty, because Shefty just has this stored away in his brain. And it just absolutely soaks up in your brain that this knowledge of champions and runner-ups and the courses where the championships were held. I mean, is this now you're University of Arizona graduate? I'm not sure if that school helped you become this way, but like how did you first start getting this, I guess, thirst for sports trivia? Like, when did this start for you?
Actually, it's just a photographic memory. Actually, I'll go through the story. Back when I was 7 years old, my dad was a professor. So professors at the university could take a sabbatical and go where they wanted to go for a year. And so back in 1972, my dad decided we were going to go live in Switzerland for a year. So my brother, who's 2 years younger than me, my mom and my dad, we spent a year in Zurich. And Zurich has this wonderful tram system. I believe there's 15 different routes. And for some reason or another, I memorized every tram stop in the city, every line. And believe it or not, and I would actually tell my mom where to get off the tram when we used to go visit my dad at the university or wherever we were going. We were going shopping. I just knew where to get off. And my dad actually had a professor friend who recently passed away. He'd come by the apartment we were living in and he would quiz me. And I would just get him. I was born with a photographic memory. Now, sometimes I can't remember the name of somebody I've just been introduced to, but for some reason or another, I can remember facts, figures, places. It's more like where the event was held.
Yeah.
Especially if I've covered it. If I've covered the event, I just have this knack of remembering certain facts that they just stick in my mind for some reason. I don't know where it comes from. It's obviously somewhere in my family. Other people have good DNA. I mean, it's just good DNA, I guess.
Right. Well,
some people are good at certain things. That's one of my hidden talents. Is I just remember things.
You're in the right position for that talent. Just so people understand how much experience you have being on site at USGA championships and covering them. What's the total now of USGA championships you've covered?
It's now up to 163. I don't know if I think there might be people in the office who've done more. I think John Mummert, our photographer, he claims he's done more. Now he's cut back his schedule a little bit over the last few years. He doesn't do as many events as he once did, but I know Ross Gallerno, who's our scoring guru, and I think 150 plus. And there's officials out there, I'm sure, who've done a lot, more than 100.
Yeah,
but
that's a big number. That's a big number.
It's a big number. And actually, I've done two more. I did two more before I got to the USGA. So I've actually covered 165. I did the US Open, US Senior Open in 1998, back when I was living in California working for the newspaper I worked at. So actually, the number is 165, but I don't count those as part of my number at the USGA.
I just want to let you know that Lee Jansen won the '98 U.S. Open. Just in case you forgot, I just want to let you know.
I do remember that. I actually was covering a local guy who Jason Gore. That year he qualified.
Oh my gosh! It only took us 6 minutes to start talking about Jason Gore. This is a record.
Yes, that's right. I was covering him up at the Olympic Club, and he didn't make the cut, but I was around. That was the year the whole location on 18, I believe.
Yeah, Payne
round
Stewart.
two was a little dicey. They had to bring Tom Meeks up, who was the director of rules and competitions at the time, to explain it. It was quite a championship.
Yeah, there's a lot going on with that one. I distinctly remember. I think it was Payne Stewart horseshoeing a putt that rolled all the way off the green. Yeah.
Tom Lehman too.
Yeah. So, University of Arizona graduate. I'm guessing a degree in English Lit journalism, or did you just go straight to cryptography? Like how did this work?
Actually, was a broadcast journalism major with a minor in journalism. I had desires of getting into television. Realized it was a pretty tough racket to get into, and I started working at the school newspaper as a junior. They had an ad in the paper looking for writers. Never really written anything in my life before, but I love sports. I knew I wanted to do something with sports. I figured, why not give this a shot?
Yeah.
So I went down to the paper. It was in the basement of the student union building, met the editor, and basically I got all kinds of crazy assignments. I mostly intramurals, swimming, a lot of the minor sports, you name it, I did it. And I learned about some of my stuff. If I probably went back and looked at it today, I might laugh and be astonished of how bad some of it might have been. But that's where I cut my teeth.
Yeah.
And that was the fall semester of 85. And then in 86, the guy who was supposed to be the sports editor somehow was forced out. So they brought a new sports editor in. And so they gave me the baseball beat, which was at the time a great beat because Arizona baseball was really, really good at the time. And they were returning a lot of players, and they played a lot of games. So you would cover a lot of games during the week, and you get a chance to do a lot of stories. And they ended up winning the national championship that year. Now, I didn't go because it was school ended before the College World Series, but I got a chance to cover some great guys and really, really learned a lot. And then the following year I became sports editor, covered the football team, and did some basketball, which was big time at that point. Lou Olson's era had begun, and the place was going mad for basketball. And then I landed a job at a small paper in LA 2 weeks before I graduated. So that's kind of how it all started.
Wow. So you get to LA, and I'm guessing going from, obviously University of Arizona, big school, but then you go to LA, you got to be, I'm thinking you just got to be just a tiny fish, just in an absolute massive ocean.
Right. Yeah, I worked for a small paper in Glendale, California, which is a suburb, a little north of Los Angeles, not too far from Dodger Stadium, and mostly covered preps. And again, working for a small paper, you get to do a lot of things. I even got to do a few Dodger games. Back then, the Raiders would actually fly local members of the press on the team plane.
Hey now.
So I went back to Green Bay for a game. I flew on the plane. I actually sat on the bus next to Howie Long, and he was giving me all kinds of stuff. He goes, "You're the guy in Glendale that must be writing bad stuff about me." I said, "Not me. I'm not screwing around with Howie Long. He's a pretty gigantic man." I think I sat next to John Clay, who was a offensive lineman. This was just on the bus ride up from the charter.
Right.
And so they would put you on the team charter, and then you'd fly to the game. It was on, I believe we flew in on a Friday, stayed overnight on Friday and Saturday, and covered the game. And then you'd have to get right back onto the bus. So you didn't really have time to write your story. You have to write your story basically on the plane. And at that time, I don't believe our paper published on Monday. So my story ran on Tuesday. So I did one trip with the Raiders back then. That was pretty cool. It was a little interesting. A young kid like me, I think I was 21, 22 at the time.
Oh my gosh, so, hanging with the
Raiders.
Throwing
me into, sitting on the plane with all these great Raiders. I think Marcus Haynes was on the team. That was back in their heyday when they were really good.
Yeah.
So and then I went from there to Santa Clarita, and that's where the Jason Gore stuff comes in. I met Jason when he was 14, a freshman in high school, and I was at that paper in Santa Clarita for 10 and a half years before I landed the job at the USGA.
So so you land the job with the USGA, but what was kind of your first golf writing assignment? We talk about how a lot of guests on the podcast, I always ask them, how did you get into the game? And I'll definitely ask that to you as well a little bit later. But what about your first golf writing assignment? I mean, was it covering Jason Gore, or were there other kind of assignments that you had that because you're a sports writer, but at some point you have to develop a passion for golf to be with the USGA for the 20 years you've been there.
Right. I did a couple of golf stories in college. We didn't go out and cover tournaments because they didn't play any tournaments really at home back then. I think they had one event. But I remember Mike Springer came down to our offices at the Daily Wildcat and asked for a photo. And then I covered a little bit of stuff in Glendale. I think I did a couple features, and you take a couple of scores over the phone. But yeah, Jason was probably one of the first big guys I got to cover because he was at the time 14. He was an up and coming star, but I knew this kid was going to be pretty good. And so I basically chronicled a lot of his high school matches. I would go to the postseason that he went to. There were other good players in the area too. One kid, Jason Summelsberger, qualified for the U.S. Open at Congressional in '97. He was 19, I think, at the time. But yeah, that was basically it. And then in '98. I think what helped me get the job at the USGA were two events, the U.S. Open and Olympic, where I got to go up there for a week. And then the U.S. Senior Open was at Riviera Country Club that year. And so I covered that. And then that same year, they moved what was called the Nissan Open. I think it's now called the Northern Trust, whatever, Hyundai Genesis Open, whatever sponsors doing the event these days. That was played at Valencia Country Club in our backyard. And we did, I want to say 10 to 11 special sections for that event. I mean, we were doing every little feature imaginable, writing up all the players, and I basically headed that up. So those three things got me a lot of good clips, a lot of good stuff that I could send when I saw the job opening for the USGA to send to them, and I think they saw what I had done, and I think that helped get me to the USGA and land a job that I did.
So my first experience in a USGA media center was obviously not the typical, because it was the 2020 U.S. Amateur. First time meeting you and Brian DePasquale, manager of Championship Communications. But that was my first experience. And as many people can imagine, due to COVID, I was very lucky just to get out there. It was like 6 of us that were wedged into a room that obviously appropriately was actually called the Wedge Room at Bandon Dunes.
Yeah.
And, this is obviously a very different experience for me just being in the room, but obviously it was very different for you guys because there's no galleries. There were multiple stages of COVID testing. Everything was very strict protocol and everything went very, very well, safety wise. But this was anything but a typical media room. I think people would be kind of interested to hear maybe how the typical media center of a USGA is operated when, whether it's this year's U.S. Amateur or a U.S. Open. Most people, they're watching it on TV. They see the highlights. They see the champion holding a trophy. Obviously now with social media, you're seeing a lot of things, posted, whether it's a tweet, an article, photo, video. But, you're writing the game stories. What is maybe for a typical USGA championship that you're going to be on site, what is maybe your typical prep? And then what is your experience throughout the week? I know it's a big question, but briefly, can you walk through that so people understand?
Sure. Yeah. Let me take one thing before I get into that is every championship's a little different in terms of media room, media size. Like if you go to the U.S. Open, the media tent is a tent.
Right.
I mean, it's ginormous. I remember the first time I walked in '98, my first U.S. Open. I walked in there, I was like, whoa, this is so much different than any event I've ever been to before because it was, there were hundreds of reporters in there. Just dozens of rows of tables. And then obviously the USGA's had their setup up front with their, their helpers. We used to call them the Minnesota 10, the guys that would come on site to assist us. Versus going to, let's say, the U.S. Amateur, which might be a small conference room, depending on where it is and the size of the media market that we're in. If we're in a market where we know there's going to be 20 plus reporters and X amount of cameras and this and that, we might have a bigger room versus maybe a U.S. junior where there might be 5 reporters there. So we try to set the room size accordingly. We always said nowadays you have to make sure there's Wi-Fi. And because everybody's doing multimedia stuff like yourself,
Sure.
there's other media outlets that are coming in doing photos and all kinds of other things that do video. So that's basically the media room size. It depends on the championship. Now, for me, my rules will depend on what championship I'm going to as well. If I'm going to the U.S. Open, I'm probably going to be writing a game. I'll probably write the game story for the day. I'm helping out with our photos that come in, doing the galleries, the captioning. I'm assisting other people looking for stories, going through notes. A couple weeks before the Open, I'm doing all the bios for all the players. So, that way I've actually got a pretty good idea of who's in the field and how they got there. Some of the more interesting storylines that might pop up, especially for qualifiers. At the U.S. Amateur Floorball this year, not only writing a game story, but I was also helping out with media. So we had media coming in with credentials. We had to make sure they properly got tested,
Right.
which is something we didn't have to do on a normal circumstance. But this year, in last year with COVID, you had to make sure everybody was okay. You don't want people, somebody who's tested positive to be on the grounds. You had to make sure they were wearing a mask in the media room and that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's a lot of prep. Going through it. We have an online bio that all the players fill out, and I go through those really tooth and comb. I mean, I'm looking for the best human interest story that might make for a great feature, or might help another media guy out with a feature.
Right.
I know you mentioned Brian DePasco. He and a couple of other people on staff we do these storylines before the championship, and we'll identify 30 to 40 players if it's the U.S. Amateur, maybe more because it's a bigger field, and we're looking to find good human interest stories that the media might want to write about, or somebody like you might want to interview.
Right.
So we're not only providing content, but we're also assisting media so they can produce content.
Very well said. Yeah, I definitely am a firsthand benefactor of that, because I know that in that room, and just even you throwing out, hey, that kid that just made it to the quarters, or that kid that just made made match play in a playoff. Did you know that he did this,
Right.
or he goes there, or his brother qualified, or his
Sure.
like obviously like a Rachel Keane with her mother being a walker
Sure.
cover, different things like that.
Right, and you also have people coming to these championships that don't know a lot about amateur golf. Now the U.S. Open, I'm serious. The
Yeah.
U.S. Open's a little different animal. People know who Tiger is. People know who Phil Mickelson is, or Brooks Koepka, or Bryson DeChambeau. These are names that are on television day after day, year after year, and you've gotten to know them. When you go to the U.S. Junior Amateur, they don't know who Nicholas Dunlap is. They don't know who Cohen Trolio is. I mean, yes, the diehard guys that do this every day, yes, they know who some of these guys are, but the local media guy probably doesn't know who these guys are.
Right.
And you want to make sure you get that information to them so they can write a nice human interest piece, because they come in a lot of times blind. And it's oftentimes I'm at a championship and somebody will ask me, what's a good story? And I'll give them 2 or 3 really good pieces. This year at the floorball, we had twins, David and Max Ford.
Yeah.
And they were playing with different partners. So you had the 2 brothers in the field, 2 twins, and they were not teammates. They were playing with a different player. Each side was different, which was kind of unique. Usually a brother tandem would play together, but in this case, David was exempt because he was a top 400 player and wanted to play with another exempt player.
Right.
Whereas Max was not exempt, and so he had to go qualify with a partner. So it's a lot of little inside information like that you find out, but the local media guy might not know that.
He
probably doesn't know that.
I distinctly remember at Oakmont at the U.S. Amateur this year, someone asked me, and I know it was some sort of a media person. I do not remember the specifics of who they were, but I do remember them asking me who was leading the U.S. Amateur Open.
Yeah.
And it was during match play. And I didn't know how to explain. How do you explain? Yeah. So I got lost in there. But no, you're right. And we're in the world of amateur golf, and there's other media that aren't. But it's great that they're giving it attention. It's
right.
Yeah, you want to make sure they know how to communicate the story effectively.
Yeah, the biggest thing I always tell people is we don't conduct tournaments either. We conduct
championships. Oh my God!
Championships. Yes.
Don't say.
Believe me, the first day I walked into the USGA in 1999, my editor, I mean, he just drilled me to the proper terminology of things. It's like, it's not a tournament, it's a championship. It's not a sand trap, it's a bunker. It's not a pin; it's a flag stick. You have to, and when you're running for the USGA, you have to use the proper terminology, or somebody is going to get on you. And so, believe me, I made a few mistakes early on, but it's ingrained in you that you use the proper terminology. What's in the rule book? What's the proper vocabulary for golf terms? We can't use slang stuff. You have to make sure it's proper. I know that probably infuriates a few people, but that's just the way it is.
I catch myself at USGA events. I start saying tur. Oh no. I've done it before. I've done it, so I
Yes.
know what you're talking about.
Hey, I have seen, and I won't name names. I've seen some people associated with the USGA who sometimes say tournament.
Oh boy.
So you're not alone. It's human nature. I mean, everything's called a tournament. It's a competition. But yes, these are championships. We conduct national championships.
Yes, you do. So your first one, I think you mentioned in '99 was. Well, I know you joined in the USGA in '98, '99, and then your first
Right.
championship was the U.S. Junior. And I actually looked it up, and I'm sure you know this, but actually in '99 that was the year of the record amount of entries. So the most number of entries for the U.S. Junior was in 1999. And
Right.
this is your first year on staff, and it's kind of interesting that you're coming in really right after or just as the Tiger effect is hitting the game. I mean, he obviously wins his first Masters in '97, and then it's all systems go with Nike. And I'm guessing there's a few kids running around wearing red shirts and black hats that week.
I don't remember all the attire the kids were wearing, but yes, I think Tiger definitely had an effect on the number of kids playing, and he made the game cool.
Yeah.
I mean, God, when I started playing golf in the high school in the early '80s, I mean, people thought I was a geek. It's like, oh, my grandfather plays golf. Why are you playing golf? It's like you plaid pants and odd clothing, and it just was not, the game was not as chic as it became when Tiger started winning, started looking like an athlete, strong, fit, supple, hits the ball a mile. And so you started to see that as a byproduct in the late '90s. And like you said, it was one of my first events. It wasn't my first event on staff. I had done the U.S. Open. I had done the women's pub links. But the junior amateur that year ended up, back then it was crazy. You played 2 rounds of stroke play. Then you had double rounds of match play every day. So you went 64-32, 16-8, and then 4-2. So you played the semis and finals on the same day. They didn't have a 36-hole final back then. And my final that year, well, that morning we actually had a hailstorm, which delayed play. You had all these volunteers there with their ball fixtures fixing all the marks of the green. So that was the start of the championship day. And then the final ended up being Camilo Villegas, long before he developed his guns,
right,
after going to Florida and bulking up a little bit, and Hunter Mahan, who, was wearing the sunglasses. He was a Southern California kid. He was living in Texas. They moved to Texas, but he had that Southern California kind of cool to him, and he ended up beating Camilo in the final. And those guys obviously went on to have great careers. Camilo couldn't have been. He was such a nice kid. He was very quiet. He was there with his Colombian guy who was part of the Colombian national team.
Right.
I think his name was Felipe Harker, and he was his caddy. And no, he didn't have his parents there with him. He was just a super polite kid. Thank you, that type of stuff. And then Hunter had a great summer. He had won the Western, I believe, and the North and South. He became the first kid to win the North and South Western Junior and U.S. Junior in the same year. And he came in as the guy.
Right.
He was the pre-championship favorite. He wasn't a medalist, but he was the pre-championship favorite, and he lived up to the billing and ended up winning.
Now, we were at the U.S. Junior this year. You mentioned Nicholas Dunlap and Cohen Trolio. Dunlap beat Trolio in the final, and you just mentioned two fantastic juniors, Mahan and Villegas, and you've seen some of the best juniors come through the last 20 years, and for every Brian Harmon and Jordan Spieth that goes on to the PGA Tour, there's a Jordan Cox and a Jay Wang that are the runners up that don't make it. And I know
or
that
Philip Francis.
Yeah. I mean, I know this is 20 years, but do you remember? And maybe it was Villegas, maybe it was Mahan, but do you remember getting an impression on any junior over the last 20 years that you? I mean, obviously it's very, very early, but do you remember looking at a kid and saying, "Yep, that kid's going to make it"?
Well, Jordan Speed for one. I mean,
Okay.
he just had a certain aura about him. Even when he won his that year, he won his first one. I was covering the girls that year. We had the girls and the boys at Trump National at the same time. And actually, my winner was Amy Anderson, who's now Amy Olsen on the LPGA Tour.
Yeah.
And a great trivia question about that one is the two medalists won that year.
Interesting.
But Jordan just had this something about him. You could just tell he was different. He obviously had physical talent, but there was a mental makeup to this kid that he was super polite, etiquette. This was the complete package. He had the golf game. He had the demeanor. You could tell he was raised well by his parents. Both were athletes. His dad, in fact, played baseball at Lehigh University, not far from where I live. But he was the one kid. And I thought Philip Francis was a can't miss kid. I watched him play in 06 out at Rancho Santa Fe. There was just, nothing seemed to faze him. It was like 90 degrees outside. And the kid's hardly breaking a sweat. And he was dominant. You just thought, God, this kid's going to make it. And it just turned out it didn't happen. I mean, he went to UCLA. It didn't happen there. I think he transferred to Arizona State. Didn't happen there. I mean, you just never know with some of these kids. Because when they go to college, things change. Their bodies change. They find other interests. Who knows? It's a weird thing. Sometimes kids come out of nowhere, and sometimes kids, are studs at 13, 14, 15, and then when they get to be 20, they're out of the game. It's just like I just did a story on Jim Liu for our next Golf Journal magazine. He was the number 1 junior in the country. He broke Tiger Woods' age record in 2010 when he won the junior Am. He was a medalist three times medalist. He also should have won a second one in 12. He was 5 up at the lunch break, ended up losing to this Andy Bohum Shin, who's another kid we don't know where he's at. He's completely out of the game.
Okay.
But he goes to Stanford. He's everybody wants this kid. He's a super bright kid. He's got the complete package, but he runs into a little back injury. So his game doesn't live up to what he expected it to be. And a year and a half, 2 years later, he quit the golf team and just became a student. And now he's working in the financial world in San Francisco. He's a great kid. He's probably going to do very well for himself. He's got everything going for him. It's just golf game wise, it just never materialized. I never took it to that next level where you thought where it would go.
I'm listening, just the passion that you have for it, and just the experiences that you've had, just seeing all these young kids, and obviously they progress to the USAM or they progress to professional ranks. And I'm just thinking back now. You're looking at 98, 99, we're looking at 20 years. And if I go through the Rolodex of just kind of the media if there's going to be a media frenzy in the last 20 years, I mean, you're post Tiger. So there's not, he's gone. And I'm guessing, I mean, is it fair to say that the most interesting media frenzy you've experienced was maybe around Michelle Wie?
Oh, definitely. And I go back with Michelle to 2000, actually, when she was 10 years old. And she became the youngest player to ever qualify for any Open. I think it was any Open USJ Championship is what the record. There was like Beverly Class and a few others that never qualified. They just basically, back in the day, you just signed up.
Right.
Because they didn't have the numbers, you just got into the championship. Well, she qualified at 10, and she was 5'6". I went back and actually looked at the story I wrote, the little sidebar I wrote on her from 2000. She was 5'6". She looked like she was in high school. I mean, just physically. Now you can tell. You looked at her face and the way she talked, and you could tell she was still 10. But
right.
Golf-wise, she was beyond her years. I remember one mother came up to me and she goes, "That can't be 10." She points at her daughter. "That's 10." Her daughter was like, 4 feet. Just a little pipsqueak.
Right.
But so Michelle Wie qualifies, and nobody knows who Michelle Wie is at that time, and she was just kind of this 10-year-old. We all thought, wow, a young kid's going to play in the championship. Let's go see what she's got. And she ends up making the cut at 10 and lost in the first round to Cindy Lee 3-2. But you could kind of sense something was special.
Something's coming.
Yeah, and every year the next year in 2001, she qualified again for the Pub Links. She ends up playing Hillary Lunke, who is a Curtis Cup player, ends up winning the U.S. Women's Open a couple years later. She hit all 17 greens in regulation and beat her, I think it was 2-1 in the second round. This is an 11. And the one thing that she didn't that you could tell might be an issue with her, and it kind of stood with her the rest of her career, was her putting. She struggled on short putts, and that kind of led to some early ousters in some matches. I remember she lost to Maru Martinez at Philadelphia Country Club in the Women's Am. I believe that was 03. She missed a couple short putts in that match. In 02 at Sun River, I think she lost the quarterfinals. Putting was kind of a thing there. And then the next year, she obviously won. She beat Barada near Pathpong-Porn, who was a Duke All-American, who would win the Women's Amateur a month later. She beat her in the final. And that was kind of the takeoff from Michelle. As the more and more she played USG events, she started trying to qualify for U.S. Women's Opens. The legacy was starting to be built. And then the big one was 2005 when she qualified for the men's U.S. Amateur Public Links, not the women's,
right.
The men's. And people thought, why is she here? And she goes, well, she qualified. She went through the 36-hole process. She played from the tees that they used for the championship. She got into the field, and it was like mass hysteria. I mean, there were people coming out of the woodwork to come to this golf course outside of Cincinnati. It was a circus. We had a media room set up I think it was an old cart barn. And, there's a good number of media there to start. Golf Channel was there. Some of the normal people who cover it. But every day, more and more people, as the more she advanced, more and more people were showing up. I think she beat Paul Claxton from Auburn in the first round. And she beat this kid, CJ Hockersmith, in the second. And that kid was like, he had lost. You could tell he was not going to win on the first tee. There were cameras there, and he was totally petrified.
Oh my God!
I mean, he never, some of these kids had never played in front of cameras before.
Right? Yeah, they don't know.
You got media moving around. It's like the kind of like the Tiger, what Tiger's opponents kind of felt like back in the day when they're all moving around and people are cheering and yelling, and they're not quite used to it. And then in the third round, she beat Jim Renner, who was at Johnson in Wales, not the Renner that was on the tour,
right?
The older Renner, but and then. In the quarterfinals, she ran into Clay Ogden, and he took her out 5-4 pretty handily. But the thing is, we had to make announcements on the website that there's no more parking available.
Oh my God!
I mean, this place was a pretty good sized facility. I mean, it was a public course with 27 holes. It had a pretty good. It was kind of out in the open. It wasn't like landlocked with buildings or anything else. If there was some parking available, we had to basically say there was no more parking available. Well, when she loses, and it was a Friday morning. The whole place cleared out. I mean, there was like 10 people left watching. Ron Balicki was there covering, late Ron, who was a great golf writer for Golf Week, myself, and a few others. And playing in the afternoon is a guy named Anthony Kim. You might have heard of him.
He's
made it on the tour. He was an All-American Oklahoma. Nobody's watching him.
Uh-huh.
Nobody cared. Michelle Wie was out.
The circus left town.
And the thing is, the biggest thing that saved me that week, because that was the first time I actually had worked a championship as a media relations person, because back then we were kind of spread thin, and so they had to use extra people to help out. So I'm doing it for the first time from a media relations perspective. I've got Michelle Wie playing. I've got a massive amounts of media there. Beth Murison, who's now Beth Major, came in basically just to handle crowd control out on the golf course. John Mummer, our photographer, came in just to shoot her. In fact, we were joking that he would make up business cards, the official photographer of Michelle Wie. and then I had myself, and we had another photographer shooting the other stuff. And so the biggest thing that saved me that week was the British Open was also going on at the time. So all the major golf writers were over in the UK, but they were still following her here. We had when we ran the numbers for the website hits, it was like off the charts. It was like 11 million people had logged on to the site to check scoring because so many people were interested in this story. And we were one more round away. In fact, Marty Parks, who used to be our senior director of communications, flew in that morning. We were one more win away. If she had got 1 1/4 of moving the media center to the actual clubhouse, because I was running out of room. I mean, I had guys from the New York Times coming in. I had Mike Rick from Golf Channel. It was the best way to describe it was a circus. And Beth Major will tell you the same thing. It was crazy. It was one of the best weeks of my career at the USGA, even something crazier than what you see at the US Open, because it was on a smaller scale, but it was like US Open-esque type height.
Well, and I'm guessing at a U.S. Open, I'm glad you brought that up because, obviously I've seen you at amateur events, I'm guessing obviously it's a lot bigger at a U.S. Open, but maybe the media there is a little bit more accustomed to covering it, or is that not a fair statement? Like, what is
No,
do you
they
notice
have,
it? Do you notice a big difference? Do you notice a big difference between the amateur events and the professional events?
oh, sure. There's just more people there. Number one, you got
But I
more
mean,
spectators.
but other than that, I'm sorry. Other
Oh,
than the
yeah.
volume, other than volume.
Well, we have more staff on site to handle that type of student. And we've got multiple people helping out in what we call the flash area, where we bring the players in to get interviewed after rounds or before the championship. And yes, you've got generally a much more knowledgeable press. You got the national that cover golf on a regular basis. Now, more and more, you're not seeing as many per se golf writers for these papers, but yeah, they've got people covering for these papers who really know the game.
Are you the guy that has to go grab a Bryson DeChambeau or have to go grab a Phil Mickelson or grab a Brooks Koepka and say, excuse me, Brooks, we need you over here for a minute? How does that work?
And that is done by our media relations staff. So I'm technically in. So guys like you mentioned, Brian DePasquale, Joey Geske, Julia Pine, and we also get some volunteers that help us out. We might get a local SID to come help. It just depends on where the championship is and what our resources are. But we've got a huge amount of people that help out just in that media services area.
So what you're saying is they just keep you as far away as possible from all the talent, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm more or less a media guy.
Right.
I'm in the scrum, or I'm at the flash area listening to the players when they come in. I'm not the one generally going to grab them. So they'll come into scoring. Obviously, they got to sign their cards, do all that, and then we ask them politely, "Will you come to flash?" And most of them will do flash. The days of the guy coming to the media room anymore, especially after, like, let's say, a first or second round, are pretty much over.
Yeah.
You don't see that very often that much anymore. Players don't. They just want to do the flash and be done with it. Occasionally you get guys who want to come down to the media center, but it's almost like they're repeating themselves.
Right, exactly.
They're getting asked a lot of the same questions. Now, at the end of the championship, for the final championship interviews, yes, they come to the media center. They usually have the trophy, and it's a long, lengthy session, and then they're doing multiple media stuff. They're not only doing the media room, but Golf Channel gets them one-on-one. ESPN may get them one-on-one, depending on rights holders and all that kind of stuff. They get these players one-on-one for 5-10 minutes.
No,
so it's a little more. It's structured, but it's a little crazy.
Sure. No, I've seen it at a USAM where it's I saw it at Oakmont where I mean obviously It's not the full boat of a US Open, but I can definitely understand how crazy it can get. Now, you've seen a lot of champions in these championship press conferences, so to speak. You've seen it with the trophy, and is there one that comes to mind where you're thinking, man, I'm glad I'm here for this? Because obviously you've been in a lot of them. They're thanking their family. They're thanking their coach. They're thanking this. And, oh, boy, that putt on 18 really did it for me. When the ball went into the hole, that's when I knew I won.
Yeah.
I mean, you've heard all but, I mean, which is the one that you're like, man, this is good. I don't want this to end.
That's kind of hard. It's like, sometimes it's like asking which kid you like the best.
No, I know. Well, these are tough questions.
It's tough. I tell you one that does stand out. It wasn't an individual championship. It was the Curtis Cup in 2002 at Pittsburgh. Carol Semple Thompson, legend. I call her one of the great ambassadors for women's golf. She's won 7 USGA titles, won a women's amateur. She's won 2 mid-ams and 4 seniors. Well, she's playing. I think she was in her 50s at the time. Yes, she was in her 50s at the time, and she got picked for the Curtis Cup team in 2002. And it's in her backyard in Pittsburgh at Fox Chapel, and it's a Sunday, and it's singles. And the format was a little different. It was just a 2-day event back then. They hadn't gone to 3. But she makes a 27-foot putt from off the green on the last hole to win her match. And the noise, I mean, normally a Curtis Cup, it's a nice, polite golf clap. You get a few cheers. It was electric. You could feel it. I got goosebumps when she made that putt. And it's one that'll stand in my memory bank for a long, long time. And she even mentions it in one of the great. You ask her about all of her championships, and she'll probably go right to that Curtis Cup memory. I mean, it's just you can't write a script any better. You're in your hometown. You're playing for your country. It's the Curtis Cup. You're going to win the match, and you make this great putt on the last hole. It's your last Curtis Cup as a player. I mean, it's a storybook ending. You just can't write scripts better than that. So that's one that really stands out for me as pretty memorable. And then one that wasn't a champion, obviously, we talked about Jason Gore in 2005. He's a qualifier. He's playing on the Corn Ferry Tour. He gets Pinehurst. For 3 days, he plays this incredible golf. He's now in the final group with Retief Goosen. Are you kidding me? That week before, his car got broken into. They stole a whole bunch of stuff, including, I think, his stereo system. And I remember the Golf Channel arranged to get all that stuff replaced. So it's this cool story, a qualifier. This kid's playing in the final group. And unfortunately, he shoots 84. And I think Retief shot like pretty close to that. They played 35 handicappers that last day.
Yeah.
But still, when you see a kid and since he was 14, get to that pinnacle, and his mom's there, his wife's there, it's just the crowd's behind this underdog story. He's a Cinderella kid. It's almost like Francis We Met.
Yeah.
In the final pairing, and he just didn't have it the last day. But still, it was, for me personally, that was really a cool moment for me. And I got writers coming up and asking me questions about his background, and when Tim Rosenfort's coming up to ask you about Jason Gore, you feel kind of special.
Yeah, there you go.
Because these guys, I know Jason probably better than anybody out there. I mean, I've chronicled his career since he was 14, and through his Walker Cup, through winning the Pac-12s when he played at Arizona for 2 years, to his national championship at Pepperdine, all that stuff. So I've just, I've known him for so long, and all of his exploits, and to see that was pretty cool.
And now you guys are coworkers.
I was out in Vegas. I go out to Vegas every year for March Madness to watch the games and bet and play a little golf and all that stuff. And I look at my email on my phone, and I'm seeing Jason Gore is coming to the USGA as our player representative liaison for the USGA. And I'm sitting there going, is the world come full circle? Is this 7 degrees of Jason Gore hitting me in the face?
He just couldn't.
And,
he wanted to be as close to you as possible. Thing, and
it's like, oh my God, And then I get back to the office and I'm chatting with him, and it's just like we've gone to lunch a couple of times, and we've reminisced about a few things. And Jason is just—he's the same kid now. He's the same personality he was when he was 14. I mean, he's one of the great people. He's just, I don't know of anybody who doesn't like Jason Gore. I mean, every pro out there loves Jason Gore. He's just got that. He's got an infectious personality. He doesn't take himself too seriously. He's obviously got great talent, to play on the tour as long as he has. I think he's got the record for the most wins on the Corn Ferry Tour.
He does. That would be 7, by the way.
Yeah, 50. I know he shot the 59 in Omaha the year, because he got the Battlefield promotion that year. The joke was he shot 84 the final round at the U.S. Open and won the 84 Lumber Classic later in the year on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, that's so terrible. That's so bad.
But it's just he's just Jason. He's always got a smile on his face. It's like nothing bothers him. I don't know if I've ever seen him get angry, even on the golf course. Like, the great thing about Jason was when you'd interview him, whether he won the tournament, finished last, or had a bad day, he was still gracious. He was always the same person, never changed.
So, like you just mentioned, it's funny you just mentioned that just reminded me of something. Like, when you're getting interviews of these, these players, I'm guessing one of the toughest parts of your job comes on the day that the actual championship is decided, because, in stroke play events, you might have the leader like a Jason Gore or that collapses, or, a chaser that falls just one putt short. But, there's heartbreak, but it's not the same as in match play, especially in these junior amateurs or amateurs. They're all kids. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter. You got one winner, one loser. It's head to head. The winner is going to obviously answer all your questions because they're holding a damn trophy, but someone's got to go get the loser and get a quote. How do you navigate that part of the job?
You be as professional as you can. What I've learned too over the years is give them about 5 to 10 minutes. Don't go up and interview them right on the green, right when it's over. I've made that mistake before, and it can end badly. There's tears. There's just sometimes the right words don't come out of their mouth. It's it's not great. So my rule of thumb is, if you can, give them 5 to 10 minutes. Let them cool off a little bit. Let them talk to their parents. If it's if a parent situation, or if it's a mid-am, let them talk to their wife or caddy or whoever's there in the crowd following them. Let them deal with that. and then you just go up to them politely, said, you got a few seconds, and they usually talk. I mean, they understand you got a job to do. I just want to get a couple quotes from them, try to be as fair with them as possible, ask them about the other player, ask them about their week. Obviously, they've had a great run to the championship. You try to keep it as positive as you can. Get them to open up as much as they can. And sometimes you get a great interview out of them. Sometimes it's, there's a lot of tears. I remember Morgan Pressel. She did not handle losing very well. Great girl. But I tell you, there were so many tears, especially when she was a junior. I remember one year at Clockwork Club, I'm chasing, this was, I think, in the quarters or semis. We had to get a quote from her. And I chased her. She's in the car with her grandfather, Herb, and I rolled down the window. You got to get a quote. You try to be fair and balanced. You don't want to write a story. You should not have the other side of the story. This doesn't look, I mean, trying to be fair and balanced. And if you can do that, you can get a quote, do it. I mean, there's been situations where it's been, a little weird. I remember, I think Anthony Kim, I think it was 2006. And apparently right after the match, he bolted to the airport and didn't do any interviews. And the guy who was going to represent him eventually basically had to call him on the phone and said, Anthony, you get your butt back here and you talk to these reporters and be professional about it. So he came back.
Wow.
We had one other situation like that. And Brooke Henderson's a great player, great person, but she lost in the final to Kristen Gilman. And, we waited till after the prize ceremony and everything else, went up to interview and said she didn't want to talk. I'm going, what? Since when does somebody not want to talk after the final? We just want to get a couple. She didn't want to talk. She gets in her car and starts to drive away. Well, another reporter tweeted this out that she didn't want to talk. Well, Golf Canada got involved.
Uh-huh.
And they basically said, you better talk to these reporters. So she ended up calling into the media center at Nassau Country Club. We interviewed her over the phone for 5-10 minutes. So sometimes it's a little crazy, but for the most part, players are pretty good after. You just have to give them a few seconds to let it sink in a little bit, let it die down from the emotion, and then they usually give you 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
Actually, the winners are much easier.
Yeah, I was going to say the winners won't shut up. The winners will take you through 36 holes of match play if you let them.
Right.
But those are the easy ones. Now, one of the things about my year, we're not going to recap every single USGA championship, but one of the things about my year, I had 4 weeks consecutively on the road and, great championships, U.S. Junior, Western, U.S. Women's, and then finally at Oakmont. But, I really, really enjoyed the U.S. Women's Amateur, and not just the skill. The skill is tremendous. The play on the golf course was fantastic, but I just really enjoyed the vibe around Westchester. I enjoyed the, serious golf, but man, it just seemed like every girl there and woman there was having a great time. I can't remember her name, but she missed the cut. She was from Portland. She was wearing the Yankee cap. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. Not
Ellie Slama. No.
But my long story short, she shoots probably 81-76, misses the cut, but there she is with her dad getting ready to leave. She's got a big bag of stuff that she got out of the pro shop, and she's got a smile from ear to ear, and she's going home. And you just see a lot of that. And I know you don't want to play favorites as to which tournament. Well, I'm sorry, damn it, I did it again. Which champion? I know which championship is your favorite, but do you seem to feel that way too about the women's AM and the women's four ball?
It's every amateur championship I cover.
Okay,
it's amateur golf. Period. My favorite amateur championship actually is the mid-am for the stories, because the mid-am is the guys a lot of them have tried professional golf and realize they're never going to make it. So they get their status back, and they have regular jobs, they have families, they squeeze in golf where they can, but they're incredible high level. And they have a lot of them have some fantastic stories to tell because they've lived life. So they've got, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're finance guys, insurance guys, they're dentists, whatever they do, they're caddies. Some of them caddy full-time on the tour, but they have this incredible skill that they can still play. And they can come to the championship and give it a shot to try to win the national championship. But getting back to your point, that you go to these amateur competitions, and so many of them are just happy that they qualified. qualifying, you've played the mid-am. You know how tough it is to get into a championship. So many people that want to try to do it. Every amateur championship I go to, so many of these players are so appreciative of, number one, they're playing in a great venue that's in incredible shape. They're being treated well. I mean, we give them great gifts. They're playing the golf course. They're immaculate. The competition's incredible. And they're getting this opportunity to play against the best players in their respective area.
Yeah.
You mentioned the women's amateur. I mean, Westchester was fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, you walked in the door and the hospitality from the membership, the golf course itself, just the quality of the field. Like you mentioned women's amateur golf. I mean, geez, these kids are incredible.
Yeah.
In 22 years, the quality of the women's game has gotten so much better. They're coming from everywhere. They're coming from all points of the world. The instruction, the athleticism of these girls, the way they play. I mean, the way they conduct themselves, it's remarkable, and I hope it continues on this upward trend. I really do.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up about the level of play that's increased. I mean, we can go back to and the great thing is now, believe it or not, I mean, there's a lot of negative things with COVID that are tragic, but for some reason, it has caused people to get back out on the golf course at record numbers. And this is, I mean, it's almost like we're experiencing another kind of like a tiger boom, so to speak, where golf is booming again. And I think it's only going to get better.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the few sports you can do. One of the things you can do outside. Yeah. During the pandemic, nobody wanted to sit in their house all the time, but you could go out and play golf because you were outside, and the chances of you picking up the virus outside were pretty limited. I know the courses around here, they were packed. And there were some people who said they couldn't get push carts because so many people wanted them, because a lot of courses weren't allowing you to use the carts. So you had to walk. So a lot of people wanted a push cart, and the stores didn't have them. They were back ordered.
Yeah, and another thing that people probably listening fail to recognize and realize. I mean, a lot of people that are playing competitive golf that listen to this podcast, they understand it, but in the summer, I understand that's where you're going to find a lot of the PGA Tour and LPGA Tour majors and all the big tournaments. But the majority of the amateur tournaments are obviously in the summer. At a PGA Tour event, you're behind the ropes and you got a gallery in front of you, and they're yelling mashed potatoes, and then there's people all liquored up, and it just been seen. But the level of access you get at a USGA championship or any of these elite amateur events, I mean, you're right there.
You're right there, and the spectators are right there. When you go even to a Walker or Curtis Cup, you can walk the fairways with these matches.
Yeah,
you can see these players up close and personal. You go out to even the U.S. Open, you can't get that close to the players. There's ropes.
Yeah,
and the access to a lot of times these players is limited. Whereas in the U.S. Amateur, they might be done playing. I see players signing autographs for young kids, signing flags, talking to spectators, thanking the membership.
Yeah,
thanking volunteers. It's really, these kids understand, the players who come to USA championships understand, I think, what goes into putting on one of these championships. It's not just the golf course itself, it's the membership, it's the agronomy staff, it's the food and beverage staff. And if they're treated to a good time and we put on a great show for these kids, they're going to go back to their clubs and their courses and their college teams or high school teams and say, wow, what a great experience that was. And that's what we want. We want them to feel like they're playing in the U.S. Open, even though it might be the U.S. Junior or the Girls Junior.
Well, and what's funny is that these kids are basically playing in the equivalent of that. And if you come out and watch these players, these are the ones you're going to see in 2 or 3 years. I mean, I'm walking the fairways at U.S. Amateurs and U.S. Juniors, and I'm seeing players that I'm talking to, and I know that in 2, 3, 4 years, maybe even less, you're going to see them on TV. And it's just it's an incredible opportunity to, go watch these kids, right?
Yeah, like I'll go back to this. I did the story on Jim Lew, and I went back and looked at the 2010 U.S. Junior Amateur. I looked at the field. Holy cow! Jordan Spieth, Curtis Thompson, Xander Schauffele, Bryson DeChambeau. I think Michael Gellerman was in that field. He played at Oklahoma, is now on tour. There were probably 10 to 12 players in that field that Chad Rainey played in that field, just got his tour card. Did he make the cut? They were in that field. They're now playing professional golf either on the Korn Ferry Tour or the PGA Tour. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I covered the 2012 Girls Junior, my semifinalists. Aria Jutanagarn, Allison Lee, Minjee Lee, and Lydia Ko. That was your semifinals.
Good God.
And then Lydia Ko, that the year before she came over for the first time, she was the number one player in the world from New Zealand. Nobody had ever heard. Nobody really knew this girl. We knew she was number one in the world, and we were going, "What has she done?"
Right.
Well, she comes and qualifies. She had to qualify back then. We didn't have we didn't use the World Amateur Golf Ranking for exemptions until the next year. So she had to come to the States and qualify, which is no easy feat. In fact, a lot of players won't do that from a foreign country, especially as far away as New Zealand. Well, she comes and qualifies, gets to the U.S. Women's Amateur Rhode Island Country Club, shares medalist honors. Okay. We know she can play. She ended up losing the second round to a girl named Stephanie Kono, who was a UCLA All-American Curtis Cup player. But you could just see the talents. I think she was probably 14 or 15 at the time. You could just see that this girl is going to be special. And obviously, the next year she ended up winning the women's amateur and losing the semis of the girls' junior. So incredible stuff. I mean, that's the beauty of covering our amateur competition, especially the juniors in the amateur championships, because you are seeing the future of the game. I mean, not everybody obviously is going to make it, but there's going to be two or three. You say, hey, I remember back when Michelle Wie was playing in the girls' junior. I remember when I saw Lydia Ko, win the women's amateur, that kind of stuff. Minjee Lee winning the girls' junior. And then Minjee Lee's brother ends up winning the junior am a few years later.
Yeah. Insane.
He's now on the European tour winning events.
Yep. No, you're 100% right. The talent level, I mean, it's got to start somewhere, and all the great talent runs through the USGA at some point.
Yeah. And like this year at the junior am, we had a kid get into the field on exemption he was from Ukraine. I had another kid from Bulgaria, another kid from Russia. They're coming from South America, Australia, New Zealand, China. I mean, they're coming from everywhere. And now with the fact that we exempt so many players based off the WAGR, kids can now come to the United States and play in our championships without having to go through the qualifying process, which makes it, they're guaranteed a spot in the field, which makes it a lot easier for them to spend the money to come over here and play.
I'm going to get you out of here because you have more stories than anyone I've ever had on the back of the range, and I thank you for being this encyclopedia of amateur golf knowledge. But I got to ask you, one of the things that I get asked all the time, that I'm sure you get asked all the time, is, wow, Ben, I saw you at Oakmont, or I saw you were at Westchester. Do you get to play the golf course? Everyone thinks that I go there, show up, I take a couple pictures, and then I'm out playing golf. That's not really the case. That has to be one of the perks, one of the many perks of your job. I'm sure there's times, maybe after the championship's over on a Sunday or a Monday, you get to tee it up. Is there, has that happened? I mean, I know you played Westchester. Westchester, but I mean, there's got to be one that maybe is at the top of the list. Like, I can't believe they're paying me to write and then I get to go play.
Yeah, there's a couple. Yes.
Yes.
The best one is 2018. The U.S. Girls Junior was at Poppy Hills in Pebble Beach, inside 17 Mile Drive, and we had all these fog delays, and we were wondering if we were going to finish on Saturday on time. And the reason I say that is on Sunday, one of my colleagues at the USGA had arranged for us to play Cypress Point.
Oh.
Well, Cypress Point is, as many people know, is one of the top 2 or 3 golf courses in the world. It's been on my bucket list forever. And as soon as we got this set up, it's like, oh my God, I can't wait. I mean, I've read the match. I've seen pictures. I've heard stories. Enough. You hear everything about Cypress Point. Well, we're wondering if we're going to get done on Saturday.
Right.
Because of all these fog delays. And if it goes to Sunday, if we finish up on Sunday, well, guess what? Cypress Point's closed on Monday. We're not playing Monday.
Oh no! And
we're scheduled to fly home, I think, Monday night or Tuesday, whatever it was. I think it was Monday night. So we get down to the final 4 for Saturday. So we have the semifinals, and we're going to supposedly play the semifinals in the morning, start the 18-hole final in the afternoon, and then spill over to Sunday. Well, they gathered the girls together. I think it was on Friday night, and they said, what do you guys want to do? And all 4 of them wanted to get the whole thing done on Saturday because one was going to the Canadian Women's Amateur, which started like 2 days later. Another one was in I guess they call it is it the Wyndham Cup now?
Yeah,
I
Wyndham
think it's
Cup
called the Wyndham Cup. I
used
think
to
a
be
couple
Cannon Cup. Yeah,
Cannon Cup, right? So they want to get out of there as
right.
quickly as they can. So they play the semi. Fortunately, the fog was not bad on Saturday. So they get the semifinals done, and we start the final. And they talk to the girls again. You guys sure you want to play? They both agreed to play 36 holes on Saturday afternoon, or whatever time they started the final. I think it was around 12 o'clock. So Alexa Pano and Yulimi No are in the final, and they combined that day, I think, to play 100 holes of golf total. It's the longest day of golf that I have known. I think I looked it up. That's ever happened in USGA history, where they played the semis and a 36-hole final on the last day. They finished, and by the time Yulimi No finished, the fog came back in. So, but basically within like a half an hour of that match finishing, and I think she may have won 4-3, something like that. If that match had gone like to extra holes, we would have been playing on Sunday morning. And guess what? I don't think we've been teed up at Cyprus. And the next morning, of course, we got to go play Cyprus, and it was everything it cracked up to be.
Oh,
it was
my
pretty
God.
incredible. And I did par 16, knocked the hybrid on the green. So that's probably the greatest course I've got a chance to play with. Now that we didn't have the championship there, but it was basically the area.
Sure.
We are going to have a Walker Cup there in a few years. And then I got a chance to play Shinnecock twice, once for Media Day for the Open, and then once the day after the Women's Open in 13 at Sabonic, which is right down the street. So, yes, it does help to have some USGA connections when we go to these championships. I do get to play my fair share of golf, and I'm very grateful for it every time I get that opportunity, because these places are special. I mean, they're incredible golf courses. They're fun to play. They're memorable. And certainly I am grateful for every opportunity I've gotten a chance to do that. Now, we don't always get a chance to play the course. Sometimes they're closed for maintenance and this and that. But like one year I played Sundown Creek after the women's amateur in 2005. I played it without any flags in the holes. I had to play it from memory from the basically from the hole locations that we had for the final, because they didn't obviously change them.
I remember at Oakmont, they were punching the practice green during the award ceremony, basically.
Oh yeah. A lot of times when the championships end on a Sunday, it's sometimes difficult to play the course on Monday unless there's an outing.
Right.
Because the superintendent just basically wants to use that day to, get the course back into shape again for the members.
Yeah.
I had that at the Senior Am this year, where I wanted to play on that Thursday after the morning final, and they just said, we're closing the course. We got all these members that want to play on the next day, and so my consolation prize, I got to play Oakland Hills on Friday.
Oh, you poor baby!
So,
you poor baby!
Poor baby, yeah, and it's fantastic. They just redid. Gil Hansen did a redo of it. It's incredible. I had played it 5 years earlier after the amateur, and it's 10 times better now than it was even then.
Unreal. I know you have a trivia question for me. I'm going to let you have the last word on this episode, but I want to get a quick fire thoughts on a couple things.
Okay.
So the most USGA championships by a man is tied at 9. That's Tiger and Bobby Jones.
Correct.
Does Tiger get to 10 either at a U.S. Open or at a U.S. Senior Open?
I think he's got a shot at the Senior Open. I don't think he's got a shot at the U.S. Open. Not with his physical condition the way it is. We just don't know how many more U.S. Opens he'll even play in.
Yeah.
But I think he's got a shot at the Senior Open if his body can hold up. I know he wants to do it because he'd be the first player to ever win 4 different USGA championships. That's never been done. Not even Jack Arney can claim that, because Jack and Army never won the junior. Jack played in 5 juniors and never won it. Semifinals was his best finish, I think, in 50, sometime in the late 50s, I think it was 57, 58, I think it was.
So here's one for you. Last person to go back-to-back at a USAM was obviously Tiger. He won 3 of them in a row. Does anyone win back-to-back USAMs ever again?
Yeah, I think that could be done. Especially it depends on how old the player is when they do it. If somebody's like a senior in college, I don't think the chances are good. But I think it's like a let's say an 18 or 19-year-old kid did it. I think there's a shot. Yeah, Byung-Hun Yan made a pretty good run when he won in 2009 at Southern Hills. The next year, I think he was a semifinalist at Chambers Bay, so he made a pretty good run at it. But yeah, I think it can be done.
Okay.
In the right circumstances, it can be done. I mean, obviously, it's been done at the Women's Am recently with Danielle Kang doing it.
Yeah. Best
So,
best man or woman to go to for a quote at a U.S. Open. Best experience you've ever had getting a quote.
ooh, that's an interesting question. Wow. I've drawn a blank on this one because there's a lot of good ones. Women's side, definitely Tiffany Joe.
Okay.
How can I not think of Tiffany Joe? She's probably the funniest person I've ever met. And Jane Park's a close second.
Okay.
Tiffany Joe. On the men's side, I'm drawing up. Just kind of
there's just not many.
There's guys out there. Just off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of. So, Jordan Spieth was really good, very thoughtful. Hagestad could be pretty good at times. Sean Knapp's always good.
Yeah.
Very thoughtful, very good. Nathan's pretty vanilla. He's a great player, great person, but pretty vanilla with his quotes. Don't tell him I said that.
No, he won't listen to this. Don't worry.
Now he's going to hear this. It's going to come back. Shefty just ripped me.
It's no better than bringing up Jason Gore's 84. I mean, really, after that, no one's going to.
Right. That's Jason's always good for a quote too. Back in the day, too.
That's very true. Now you're known for your taglines and your stories. You put a lot of creativity to it, and when Jensen Castle won the U.S. Women's Amateur, I thought I was pretty sharp when I mentioned, Jensen is the queen of the castle. I was pretty proud of that one. I was pretty proud of that one. I even offered it, but it didn't make the final cut.
It did make the final cut.
What are some of your? I know you must have one or two of your favorites.
I got a few.
See, I know.
I think my best one was Magna Carta with Virginia Elena Carta when I don't know what round it was.
Oh my God.
At the Women's Amateur in 2016 at Rolling Green.
Yeah. So you're targeting your story titles for all those people that got A's.
Well, these are headlines,
right?
We've kind of gotten away from it a little bit on the hero. We call these the hero images on the homepage because with the mobile stuff, you've got to be very careful because a lot of people go in from mobile, and if you put something in there that it's catchy, but they don't really know what it really is, it can confuse people.
We don't want to confuse people.
We don't want to confuse anyone. But yeah, Magna Carta was one that came up. I think I've come up with some cute ones with Bronte Law back when she was playing. But the Magna Carta one kind of sticks out. I know there's others out there.
Yeah,
I'll give Joey Flint's our staff a great one. These two girls from Furman won the women's 4-ball. And he came up with Purple Rain, which I thought was really good.
That's
because Furman is purple,
yeah.
Paladins, that was pretty good.
Yeah, I like the Magna Carta one too, and and everyone that got A's in social studies in 6th grade really appreciates that one as well. So that's that's definitely good.
I probably sent a few people to Google, but
that's okay. That's okay. All right, I'm going to give you the final word. You are a absolute vault of knowledge, and you have a trivia question for me that I'm sure I will not get, but it's going to show off your brilliance. And really, that's what this episode's all about, Shefty. So fire away.
Okay. Well, we all know Tiger Woods had an incredible record in USGA amateur competitions. He won 3 juniors, 3 amateurs in 6 consecutive years, but he did lose 3 times. Can you name the 3 players that defeated Tiger Woods at USGA amateur competitions?
No.
One of them made it on the tour. We'll put it that way. The other 2 are a little obscure.
All right. So
one of them's a well-known player. He was a Walker Cup guy. Made it on tour.
Okay. So obviously these are. Am I correct in assuming that these are the 3 U.S. juniors before he won, or are we talking?
No.
Okay, so we're
one
talking...
of them's a junior, 1 junior, 2 amateurs, and one of the amateurs he played in, he didn't make the cut, so we're not going to count that.
No.
But, so when he made match play, 2 of the amateurs he lost. I even give you the years, 92 and 93.
Well,
and then the year the junior was 1990, which was his first junior. Then he won at 15, 16.
I'm going to let you give the answer because I have no clue.
It's a pretty good question. One of them is Tim Herron. That was at Muirfield, 1992.
Lumpy, really?
In fact, my former editor at Golf Journal, back in the previous iteration of Golf Journal, said Tim Herring came up to him at Muirfield Village and said, "Brett, you want to come out and watch me kick some ass today?"
Oh my God.
So he was pretty cocky, and he ended up taking out Tiger. The other guy that beat him at the amateur is an Englishman named Paul Page. I don't know where Paul is these days. I just know that Paul defeated him at Champions in 1993, and then in 1990 he got to the semis of the U.S. Junior and lost to Dennis Hillman, who then lost in the final to Matthew Todd. That was at Lake Merced. In fact, Jason Gore played that U.S. Junior in Lake Merced.
Seriously, when do you turn your brain off at all to rest it, or is it just pretty much going at all times?
For golf stuff, it's pretty much always going, you know.
Oh my gosh.
But that's one that, you know, I've researched it, and then I think we ran something when Tiger won I think it was his third U.S. amateur. I think my boss, when he wrote the amateur story, wrote a small sidebar about the three guys that beat him. I think Fox a few years ago did a little roundtable with the guys that he beat.
Yeah, Steve Scott and Buddy and Trip Keeney. Yeah, I remember.
Right, that. And then the three junior guys were Mark Wilson, a guy named Schwetsky, I think it was his first one. That was at Bay Hill. And then Ryan Armour, he beat at Waverly in Portland. 2 down with 2 to play in the 18-hole final, and he wins the next 3 holes and wins in 19 to win his third junior. And of course, he came back in all of his amateur wins.
I know. I was just going to say
Steve Scott had him beat.
Trip
Keeney. In fact, Trip says all the time that, you know, if he would have won that match, he probably would have turned pro.
Oh, of course.
And so he said it may have been the best thing that ever happened to him, in fact, because it didn't force him to turn pro, and obviously he's had a very successful career off the golf course.
Yeah,
with his financial stuff. So
might see him as a captain of a Walker Cup team in the near future.
I wouldn't doubt it, and I would hope we'd see him at a senior amateur too. I mean, he's now that his kid's older. You know, I think he's a college quarterback. I think now. I think.
When are we going to get a Walker Cup captain's announcement? By the way.
Oh, well, the Walker Cup's not till when? It was not till.
Well, it's in 23. It's in 23, but aren't we due to find out who the U.S. captain's going to be? And
my guess would probably be around the annual meeting, maybe.
Okay. Are you gonna call me and tell me who it is for the news breaks? Are you gonna?
Well, you want that scoop? A lot of times I don't even know who it is until like 2 minutes before they make the announcement.
Shefty, it's just you and me. No one's paying attention. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be an interesting group. You got a lot of guys that could be captains of the Walker Cup in the next few years. Obviously, Tripp's one of them. You know, maybe a Mike McCoy. You certainly know that Nathan's going to be a captain.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a slam dunk in my opinion. I would think at some point maybe Stewart is. You got a nice group of mid-am guys that are out there. The women's one's going to be a little more interesting because there hasn't been a lot of women's mid-amateur players or career amateurs that have played, you know, Curtis Cup recently. So I don't know where they're going to go, you know, 15 years from now. But we'll see.
I know one that's going to be. I think I got a good idea about one that could potentially be a captain. That's Amelia Migliaccio.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I would think. But the way before her will be Megan Stassi.
Oh yeah, yep, Stassi. Yeah, 100%.
But you don't have a lot of. I mean, between when Megan played in 2008 to now, I don't know if there's been a mid-amateur on the team.
No.
You know, it's just there's not quite the depth there, but you'd love to see I'd love to see a mid-amateur make the Curtis Cup team. I really would.
These are all issues that we will address next time. Thank you for, you know, I thought I understood the vastness of your knowledge sitting in the media center with you, but now that I had your undivided attention, it's full blown. It's impressive, and I appreciate you stopping by the back of the range, and I will see you in 2022 out at a USGA championship. And again, I appreciate you stopping by the back of the range. Happy holidays. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you, Ben, because I know how much you really put into amateur golf, and we really appreciate that. I know we appreciate that at the USGA. And there you have it. Special thanks to David Shefter for joining me on this episode here at the back of the range. Don't forget, follow along on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Every episode is available at thebackoftherange.com. We'll see you next time here at the back of the range.